Okay.
Morning.
What he said.
I made a small film or the big film? Regular film?
You fill with questions today.
I used to do all this checking every time.
Pesach, you get 4 questions. You passed that already.
Do me a favor.
It's a nice set.
You gotta find out.
You think somebody left it here?
I don't know.
Hello.
There's no name on the bag. It doesn't look.
Marty's doing food, that's it.
When Asofsky comes, I'll bet you I'll ask him, he may know.
You know, when he left for Israel,
What he uses.
he went back to Israel.
Who?
I know that, so we have to leave it until come. He may
Who's that?
recognize who.
Rabbi Skotsky, the sofa.
Yeah, see that.
That's it.
And on the Telus bag, there's no name or anything inside?
Laying here for several days.
Okay, put him back there, we'll find him.
My wife tells me what to do, not you.
Shut up. I'm telling you, shut up. I'm telling you what to do.
Leave the librarian alone. Let me get a serious question, not a joke. Do you like the older chairs better than these?
No,
As far
I'd,
as the decor is concerned,
no, as far as decor, as opposed to comfort.
whichever way.
I mean, the chairs that originally went with these tables.
The other one was leather, right? Yeah. I don't know, that's, somehow it's a cushion. Okay, I mean, I'm not gonna move them in, but. No, Rich Capella.
I'm just wondering, to be honest, I mean, because we still have some social distancing and our numbers are small here, this room is fine. But when we get into the season and we start getting 15, maybe even 20 guys.
Start getting 20 guys, maybe you should go upstairs.
Well, we may have to reconsider location.
Huh?
I already suggested to the rabbi that, no, I already suggested to the rabbi that where the 8:30 minyan is, it seems to be of the 3 morning minyans, the 8:30 minyan is the largest in terms of number of people. That as we move towards the season, that maybe the 8:30 minyan should meet in here or in the sanctuary, and the 7:30 minyan meet in the base midrash, because I'm thinking then this group could stay, since most of us go to the 7th.
Thinking of a better idea.
Yeah.
Merge the 7:30 and the 8:30 million and make
No.
it 8 o'clock.
No,
No,
well, that's a
no.
different issue. That's a whole different issue. I don't think you're going to be successful with that.
Yes, Rabbi, that sounds like a good idea.
What? No, not Marty's idea. The point I'm saying is that minyan is already larger in number of people than the 7:30 minyan. And I suggested to Rabbi Yasker that as we move to the season, have them,
Yeah, right.
You know,
Be able to use the base measure.
and then we would be, then the Daf Yomi group guys would be able to stay right there in the base medrash. Okay, and the time remains the same. It's just a switch of locations, which is easier than getting people to switch times. Okay.
Why can't they use the old sanctuary?
Well, at some point, hopefully, we'll get back to using the sanctuary too.
Oh, it's not ready?
Right? If anybody comes in looking for that house and fill them, it's in that room.
Yeah.
Write them down.
Okay. Okay, let me start with our learning sponsors. A Year of Learning, Friends of Nina Monet Eastern, Nechama Asna Bat Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdal, Lezecha Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece Leah Bracha, Isaac and Evelyn Blacho in memory of his sister Chaya Rachel Bas Isser. Month of Learning by Mark Linder in memory of his mother Yona Bat Zalman Leib. Rabbi Isaac Schmerler in memory of his wife Men Yasima Bat Yitzchak Isaac. Friends of Marilyn Schmerler in her memory Men Yasima Bat Yitzchak Isaac. Gary and Marsha Schrager in memory of his father David Ben Yosef and his mother Freda Bas Hendel. Marsha Federbush in memory of her husband Oriel Pinchas Ben Arav Shimon. A week of learning by Shelley and Oscar Moll in memory of her father Shlomo Ruvain Ben Binyamin. We have today being the 16th of August. We do not have any days of learning otherwise for today. So keeping in mind Peretz Shemach Ben Yaakov Yitzchak and the Bachur Moshe Ruvain Ben Sima Tzebela, we say what, Zev? May Neshamas have an aliyah, the crank Rafia, the Velti, the Yeshia, Hashem Tzliya, and the Chol B'nai Yisrael, a good Ben Shem.
Amen.
We do have days of learning, we just don't have any sponsors.
We don't have any sponsors for today. Okay, we have others. We have for the rest of the week. We have for tomorrow, we have 2. And then for the next day, we have 2. Just none for today. Okay. All
We're
right.
gonna learn anyhow without sponsors.
The Ribono Shel Olam is our sponsor. Right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, gentlemen, we are starting a new Amud, top of the Amud, right? Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, right? Okay, and I don't know how the art scroll breaks it up, but whether they start the new volume on the new chapter or not. That's where they do it, right?
I
Okay.
don't know, I have no idea.
Okay, so we'll do what we can. If we need to stop there for today, we'll stop there for today. Okay? All right, so it's not a problem. Okay? All right. Okay,
It does break it up that way.
that's how it breaks it. It doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise me. Okay, I happen to be using right now Cincino, because that's what I happen to have. Figure it doesn't pay to go out and buy a brand new Gemara if you got one already.
Right.
I mean, and this is easier to bring than my full Shas, which is, okay, believe me. I have an old briefcase that I keep, and the only reason I keep it is because if I have to bring a volume from the full Shas, that's the only thing that will fit in. Okay. I want us to realize, okay, that this last Mishnah and this parak still deals with this whole issue of knas, okay, and how that impacts on an individual saying, I am guilty of committing act X or act Y, okay? Why do I want us to understand that? Because, okay, since the media has recently made issues of individuals taking the fifth, pleading the Fifth Amendment, okay, do we see that in a sense, the Gemara is suggesting that there is such a concept of self-incrimination or not, okay? So, our Mishnah says, Ha'omer patiti et brito shel ploni. If an individual admits that I seduced the daughter of so-and-so, and remember we've already said that the Gemara makes an assumption, Chazal, it would appear, makes an assumption that in the situation of seduction, as opposed to rape, that in that situation, seduction, there is some compliance on the part of the woman, as opposed to rape, where it's very clearly no compliance. Okay? So the individual admits, I seduced the daughter of so-and-so. What happens? Mishalem boshet upagam al pi atzmo, says our Mishnah. Okay, right? In other words, it says he must pay the compensation for humiliation and degradation based on his own testimony. Ve'en mishalim knas, but he does not have to pay the fine. Okay. Next, ha'oner ganavti, one who admits that they stole. Right. Mishalem et keren al pi atzmo, he must pay back the principal. Ve'en mishalim tashlumei kefel v'tashlumei arba'a v'chamisha, but he does not have to pay the additional fees of the double, okay, or 4 or 5 times situation. Okay? Third example, Hemit shori at ploni o shoro shel ploni. The owner admits that my ox caused the death of, let's say, Reuven's ox, or, okay, my ox killed the Zev's servant. Okay, right? Hare zeh meshalem al pi atzmo. Again, this one must pay based on his own testimony the required amount. Okay, Hemit shori avdo shel ploni. But if he said, my ox killed the servant of so and so, ein mishalim al pi atzmo. There he does not, okay, pay it based on his own testimony. Zeh haklal, this is the general principle. Kol hamishalem yater al ma shehazik eino mishalem al pi atzmo. Anyone who must pay more than what damage he caused does not pay it simply based on his own testimony. Okay, that's the point. All right. So the
Why when it says a Michele, Michele is
okay.
no.
All right. So I'm going to
sorry.
take your questions, Zev, and just put a little spin on it and say,
I didn't mean that. I mean hey, meet that sure is plenty.
right. Okay. In other words, we're seeing here that if the person said his ox killed someone, then he would have to pay. If he said his ox killed the servant of somebody, okay, then there's a problem with his self-incrimination, right?
Yes.
Why? Because the implication is, okay, there needs to be further testimony to clarify. Did anybody see that? How can we say maybe he's saying that he killed the servant of somebody when it was really not the servant, but an actual person, right?
The point is that when you kill an Eved, the Torah says you pay a knas of 30 shkalim. And that's why it's a knas here and not the monetary value.
Okay.
That's what we're talking.
Okay, that's okay. And that's, you got that. Rashi's point is the knas ninhu shafilu ein yafed dinar noten shloshim.
Right.
It's based on Rashi. Okay. All right. So the Gemara picks up. So the Gemara's very first question is, why did our Mishnah start with the example of seduction? Why didn't it start instead with the issue of rape? Right? We've just said that there's a difference, right, between the two. So why don't you start with the issue of rape, where you were going to say that must pay the knas as well as compensation? That's the question the Gemara starts with. Vilitne anasti, okay? So why doesn't it teach about the rape situation that he raped? Lo mebaye ka'ama. The language of the Mishnah is in the format, okay, literary format of a lo mebaye. We certainly don't have to ask or question. Lo mebaye anasti, we don't have to ask or question about the rape Delo kapagim la, because in that case one doesn't degrade or ruin her reputation. La, the mishalem boshet upagam al pi atzmo, because there, okay, what we're saying is that he still has to pay humiliation and degradation based on his own testimony. In other words, the difference is that in rape, there clearly is no application to the woman's reputation because we assume it was done against her will. Whereas there could be ramifications about her reputation in a seduction situation, because we're saying the rabbis assume there could have been compliance.
Was the rape a crime at that time?
Sure.
It was
Right.
still a crime, as
Right.
opposed to seduction, which was not a crime.
They're both crimes.
They're both crimes,
They're both
but
crimes.
the assumption is, could in a seduction situation, could the woman have been compliant?
Right.
Okay, so therefore the implication is in that situation, it could cause more damage to her reputation.
I mean, he has no right to do that, even if
Okay.
he's admitting to that, but he has
Right.
no right to
He's admitting
damage
having
her
done,
reputation.
right? But the fact is, okay, already knowing that he has to pay compensation, okay, but we're saying there that maybe he doesn't have to pay the knas.
Right.
That's the point. Okay, why? Okay, aval patiti, but when he admits that I seduced her, the kapagimla, because there it does impact on her reputation, right? Ema lo mishalem al pi atzmo. So I should say that he doesn't pay based on his own testimony. Kamash malan comes to teach us that that's not the case, that in that
He does
case,
pay.
he
even on
does
his own
pay
testimony.
even on his own testimony. Okay. Now, matnitin delo kahana. Therefore, a Mishnah cannot be according to the following Tana. The Tanya, who taught as follows: Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Mishum Rabbi Shimon. He says in the name we assume of his father. Af boshet upagam eino mishalem al pi atzmo. That even humiliation and degradation, he doesn't pay on his own testimony. Lo kol himenu sheyifgom bito shel ploni. Okay, not when it's in his power to tarnish the reputation of the daughter of so-and-so. Amar le Rav Papa la Abaye, and Rav Papa therefore says to Abaye, Nechala ledida mai. Okay, that's acceptable in regarding to her. What is the situation then?
If she says, okay, I don't care, you tarnish my reputation, but give me the money, then should he get paid? That's what we're saying.
I'm not completely convinced that's the only implication.
Okay.
Okay? In other words, if she said, Amar, okay, so Rav Papa is asking, Nechala ledida. If it's been, I don't want to use the word acceptable, but let's assume for the moment, okay?
If she accepts the
In other words,
tarnishing,
I was going to say more than just the tarnishing of a reputation. If the implication was that the seduction was satisfactory to her in some way, that for in a sense she could have been somewhat compliant. So what difference does it make if he admitted it?
Right.
Dilma lo nechale la'aviha. Perhaps though that's not acceptable or viable to her father, because in that case, depending on her age, the money would have been paid to the father. Okay, if we want to take simply the monetary element. Okay, nechala la'aviha. What happens though if that sexual encounter would have been acceptable to the father? Okay, what's the situation there? Dilma lo nechala ho the b'nei mishpacha. Maybe it would not have been acceptable to other members of the family, because then her reputation affects the entire
Entire family.
family. Okay. Nechalahola b'nei, all right, b'nei mishpacha. Even if you want to say that it would have been acceptable to other members of the family, mai'i, what then is the situation? Efshar delek echad b'medinas hayam delo nechalei. It's possible that a distant relative, okay, would have been dissatisfied with that situation to him. Oh, I hear that your niece, or I hear that your so-and-so, was out, right? Okay, so what happens? We now finish that argument, that section of the discussion on the Mishnah, and go to a new section of the Mishnah. Ha'omer ganafti mishalem et keren v'chomer. When we said in the Mishnah that admission by the individual of thievery requires that they pay the principal back, but they don't have to pay the additional fees, right? Itmar. About this, the following was said, Palga Niska, that they have to split the nezek,
No,
the payment
the
of the
fine
nezek.
of Hatzi Nezek when a tom, a animal that is not killed up to more than 3 times.
All right, we'll
Pays
get
Hatzi,
to that.
that's what
Yes.
Hatzi Palgan is.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Okay, but all the Gemara is saying is Palga Niska. Okay, there's a splitting of the nezek payment here. So what do we mean by that? Rav Papa Amar says, Papa, Palga Niska, Mamona. Okay, when we're saying we're splitting the nezek money, we're talking about a certain amount of money. Rav Huna Berei de Rav Yoshua Amar. What does he say? Palga Niska Knasa. What we're talking about is splitting the amount of the fine. Okay, so now how do we clarify this? The Gemara goes on. Rav Papa Amar Palga Niska Mamona Kasavar. Why? Because he's now going to take the specific example, okay, that Ruvain shared with us, namely Stam Shvarim. If we're talking about an animal that's impacting on another animal as to whether that animal has been forewarned or not, okay, whether it's a shur mu'ad or not, what are we saying? Stam Shvarim lav b'cheskat shimor kaimi. That in general, we're saying that most oxen, okay, are not situated in are not closed in a situation where there are guarded
Most
animals.
cannot be presumed to make sure they're not going to damage on their own. They need the owner.
Okay, well,
that's exactly what it
wait,
is.
wait a second. The animal is usually free to roam.
Right.
And so therefore, when we say that the animal is not in a secluded or a protected situation, because the animal is free to roam, therefore the animal could cause damage. And that's why we hold the owner responsible. Okay? Ubadinhu, the mishalem kule. And logically, by law, we should say that if the animal does damage,
even the first time,
right, he should pay the entire amount.
Correct.
Okay, v'rachamanahu dechiyesole, but it's the Torah who basically had, let's say,
pity or
had pity,
compassion,
right, on the individual. Da'akati lo ha'id Torah. Why? Because at that point, the ox was not forewarned. The owner was not forewarned.
Why?
In that case. Rav Huna, Berei de Rav Yoshua Amar, he disagrees. And he says as follows, Palga Niska Kansa, that the fact that it's half, that it's split in half, the nezek, the payment for damages, is a fine. Kasavar, why? Because he's of the opinion, Stam Shvarim Becheskat Shimor Kaimi, that his opinion is that the average ox is guarded, is protected, is watched over. Okay? Ubadinhu, and it's logical that the law should be the lo l'shalem klal, that he shouldn't, that if that animal does, something causes any sort of, there should not have to be any payment whatsoever. V'rachmanahu dekanse, okay, and it was the Torah, therefore, that sets this penalty. Ki hechi denititare, the Torah, so such that we make sure that his ox is watched over, guarded, limited. Okay, that's their argument. Okay, let's go on now. I didn't want to jump right into the. I don't disagree with
How
you.
the Niska means the damage of the tom pays only half.
Yes, no,
That's exactly what it means.
I understand that, but I didn't want to jump into that till
Okay.
we get later into the example that they give. Okay, all right, now, Siman. So we have a mnemonic device here. Okay, Hizik ma vehemit klau. That's the mnemonic device to tell us what we're going to be discussing. Okay, Tnan. We have the following Mishnah. Hanizak v'hamazik b'tashlumi. Okay, they share the payments, right? The one whose item was injured and the one who caused the injury regarding the payments. Bishlema laman da'amar palga niska mamona. That view, that Mishnah, is acceptable regarding the one who saw this argument, who claims that the monetary payment, okay, is basically of money, of compensation.
And that the animal should have paid the whole thing, but the Torah has Rahmanas.
All right, well, we'll see. Hainu d'shayach nizik b'tashlumin. And this is where we get the fact that the payment, okay, it's a monetary payment, okay?
That they share because the
Right.
because the Nizik loses out for the whole.
Well, we'll see.
The whole.
Elelaman da'amar palga niska kansa. But according to the one who says that the half payment is a knas, okay? In other words, if a fine, the injured party receives nothing, but the owner takes half, and therefore the sharing of payments is questionable. What happens? Hashta here, delav day kashakil, batashliman ite. Okay, since it's not really his, how can we say that he takes half the payment and it becomes his? Lo nitzracha ela the pachat nevela. No, it's not necessary, but rather because there's the degradation of the carcass, and the degradation of the carcass is part of the issue. Tanina. So we learn as follows. Tashlume nezik melamed shahaba'alim metaplin benevela chada batam v'chada b'mu'an. Okay, and so therefore the Gemara says, right, we learn this, all right, that the payment of damages, okay, is that the owners deal with the carcass of the one animal, okay, and the carcass of another animal. In other words, there would be a difference between the carcass of an animal that's a tam and the carcass of an animal that's a mu'an. Utsricha. And we need this. Why? The iyashmein in tam mishum da'akate lo ayad. If we're going to say and learn it, that regarding the animal that's not been forewarned, okay, da'akati lo iyad, and he was still not forewarned. Aval mu'ad di'ad, but regarding a mu'ad animal that has been warned, ema lo, I would say no payment. V'iyashma'inin mu'ad mishum deka mishalem kule. And if I'm going to say that in the situation where it's a mu'ad animal, and there one would have to pay the entire amount, aval tam, but a tam animal, a malo, I would say no payment, tzricha. Therefore, I need both examples, both discussions. So the Mishnah goes on, the Gemara goes on. Tashma, listen to the following then. This is a clarification, this Braita. Ma bein tam lumu'ad. What is the difference then between a tam and mu'ad animal? Shahatam mishalem chatzi nezek migufo. That when it's a tam animal that causes the damage to another, okay? It pays half nezek from its body. Umu'ad mishalem nezek shalem min ha'aliyah. Okay, and whereas a mu'ad animal must have paid the complete amount of nezek from its aliyah. You want to say what?
From the best of his profits.
From
Not-
the, well, I was going to say that's a good translation, best of his property, or from the owner's highest level of property or wealth or things like that. Okay? So one comes from the body of the animal itself, and one could come from landed property that's okay, of a much higher value.
Simple example.
Yeah.
The tam pays chatzin nezek migufo means you sell the animal to tam.
Yeah.
If you sell it and the price that you get is less than the damage, he doesn't pay more. The owner doesn't pay. That's what it
just
means.
pays that.
Migufo.
Yeah.
Whatever the animal is worth, that's what he gets.
That's the value. Okay? Velo katani. But further, the Gemara goes on. Velo katani shehatam eino mishalem al pi atzmo umuad mishalem al pi atzmo. But we don't teach that regarding the tam, he doesn't pay based on his own testimony, or regarding the mu'ad, that he pays according to his own testimony. Tana v'shier. But the Gemara says, what happened? He taught this, but he omitted something, right? Mai shi'er, the high shi'er. What he admitted, what he omitted, what was it that he omitted? Shi'er chatzi kofer. That he omitted the whole issue of the half ransom, right? Imishum chatzi kofer. If we're saying that he omitted this issue of the half payment, okay, of that half payment, lav shiurahu. Maybe that's not really an omission, a point that needed to be mentioned, right? But what? Ha mani. But according to whose view is that not talking about the half kofir is not an omission? Rabbi Yossi Haglilihi. That's the view of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. The Amar, who says as follows, right? What was his view? Tam mishalem chatzi kofir. Okay, that a tam, you have to pay chatzi kofir, half the ransom amount. Okay, now what happens? Tashma, we come to a new Braita. In this case, is another testimony by the individual. Hemit shori at Ploni. Okay, he admitted that my ox killed so and so. Oh, or shoro shel Ploni, or he killed the ox of so and so. Hare ze mishalem al pi atzmo. Okay, the Braita is telling us, similar to the Mishnah, right, that he must pay based on his own testimony. My lav batam. Aren't we talking here about an animal that is a tam, not forewarned? Lo, no, says the Gemara, b'mu'ad. We're talking in this Braita about an animal that the animal and the owner has been warned. Aval batam, mai. But then what do we say about a situation regarding the tam animal? So the Gemara goes on. Eino mishalem al pi atzmo. There we would have to say that he does not have to pay based on his own admission. Adatani Sefer. I would say, but look then at what's taught later in our Mishnah. Avdo shel ploni eino mishalem al pi atzmo. There our Mishnah said that if the animal killed the servant of so-and-so, he does not have to pay based on his own admission. So the Gemara then says, Niflog v'nitne badida. So let's make a distinction, says the Gemara, and teach it in regarding to that subject. B'med varim amorim. In other words, teaching it this way. What are we talking about? Bimu'ad, with an animal that's been forewarned. Aval tam eino mishalem al pi atzmo. But in regarding a tam animal, he does not pay based on his own admission. Kula b'mo'ad kamayri. But at all, in other words, our text was teaching it all in regards to a muad animal. That's what it was talking about. Tashma, says a Braita then. Zeh haklal. This is the general principle. Kol hamishalem yater alma shehezik. Okay, anyone who pays above more than what was damaged, eino mishalem al pi atzmo. He does not pay based on his own admission. Ha pachot mima shehezik. But where it's has to pay less than the damage caused, mishalem al pi atzmo, then he would pay based on his own admission. Lo tema, don't say that's the case. Ha pachot mima shehezik, if you're talking about less than the damage caused, ela ema, but rather I would say it this way. Ha kama shehezik, but what the equivalent of what the damage was, mishalem al pi atzmo, then he has to pay based on his own admission. Aval pachot mai, but if it was less, what's the situation then? Eino mishalem al pi atzmo, that he doesn't pay based on his own admission. Litne. So let us teach it this way. Zeh haklal. This is the general principle. Kol she'eino mishalem kama shehezik. Whoever does not pay the equivalent of the damage, eino mishalem al pi atzmo. He does not pay based on his own admission. De mashma pachot umashma yater. But if it turns out, I'm going to say, that if it's less, or it turns out that it's more, tiyuvta, this is a proof text. Vehilchata palga niska knasa. And therefore the law is that that half the payment, okay, for nezek is to be considered a knas, a fine. Okay, so the Gemara thou asks, tiyuvta vehilchata. You're saying this is a proof text, and it's also the law? And yes, tamamai tuvtav. So what is the question, the reasoning then? What does it come to prove? Mishum delo katani kama shehezik. Why? Because it did not teach it on what was the equivalent of the damage. Lo psekale. Okay, and he did not cut it. He did not declare that that was the clear statement. Kevan de ikechatzi nezek. Why? Because we see in another example, okay, that when there is the need to pay half damages in a situation where there are pebbles that were kicked up, okay, from some animal going, okay, and they cause damages. De hilchata gamiri le de mamonehi, because there the law we learned was that was money that was paid. It was compensation, not a knas. Mishum hachi lo katani. Because of that reason, he didn't teach it. In other words, because you have that exception, That's why he didn't teach it that way. Okay? Vahashta, the amart palga niska knasa. And now that you claiming that half payment of the nezek is a fine, what about the following? Hai kalba da achal imre. Okay, about a dog that wound up eating some lambs. Vishunra da achil tarnegole rab rabbi. Or about a cat that ate some large chickens. Mishunahu. Okay, all right, that seems a different situation. Velo magbinin babavel. Okay, and there we say we do not collect money in Babylonia on that situation. Aval zutre, but if it were smaller chickens, or chehu, that is a more common phenomenon. Okay, and therefore umagbinan, and therefore then we would collect money. The court would collect money in that situation.
But not the larger chicken.
Well, we're going to see. Okay, right? Ve'i tafas. Okay, and if in this case, lo mafkinan mine. Okay, and if the claimant seized property, we don't take it, we don't remove it from him. In other words, if my chickens were the ones that got eaten, and it was Zev's cat that ate it, okay, and I therefore seized some of Zev's property, okay, because I wanted payment for my lost property, my lost animals. Okay, he's saying in Babylonia, the court then doesn't remove that from me. Okay? Lo mafkinen mine. Ve'i amar akav'u li zmana la'eretz Yisrael. And if the individual said, establish me, set a court date for me, establish a time for me so I can go to court in Eretz Yisrael and have one of their courts adjudicate the case. In that case,
Because they're in their show, they did.
they do those kinds of cases, right? Mikav inan lay, we can set a court date for him. V'ilo azil, okay, and if the other, in other words, both have to go to the court, both the claimant and the defendant, okay, and if he doesn't go, misham tinan lay, then we, the court in Bavel, will put a shamta, a kind of excommunication on that person. So the Gemara goes on. Bein kachu vein kach mishamtinan le. Regardless of whether he goes or not. Okay, we say that we put a ban on that person. Da'amrinan le, because we say to him the following: Salik hezkech hezikech. Okay, namely, we say to him that he has to
remove the animal that caused the damage.
remove the animal, remove the cause, remove the cause of damage, remove that which caused the damage. Okay, Mida Rabbi Natan, based on what Rabbi Natan says. Titania, as was taught, Rabbi Natan Omer, he says, Minayin shalo yigadel adam kelev ra b'toch beito. How do we know that a person cannot keep a dangerous dog or a bad dog in his home? V'lo ya'amid sulam ra'u'ah b'toch beito, nor can he maintain a rickety ladder. I'm going to translate it that way. Okay, in his home. Another Shana Amar. Why? Because the pasuk says, "Velo tasim damim beveitecha," that you should not allow a situation that brings blood upon your household. Okay?
That's what it's finished.
Okay, right. So the art scroll finishes right there. Okay, and we'll stop right there for today. Tomorrow we'll pick up with the new Mishnah and the new Perek. All right?
But I want you to know, Kenny, Caleb has a special role because Caleb Tashlichu so.
Yeah,
Right.
You know, I mean, so it's worse to have a cat in the house than because.
Yeah. That's why they say it's gone to the dogs, right?
Quick question.
Sure.
How does one warn an animal?
You warn the owner. You warn the owner.
That's what I thought, because
Yeah, you know, you don't